I always prided myself on control. In the lab, every pipette, vial, and sample was accounted for. But that morning, still recovering from last week's chemical spill, my usual calm felt fragile. My hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as I walked into our shared home office. Finn had gone on another high-security trip, claiming urgent consultations abroad, and normally, I would have breathed a sigh of relief. But a gnawing feeling told me I shouldn't relax. I moved past the desk, the shelves, the framed awards lining the wall. One trophy, a miniature crystal globe Finn had won for excellence in lab management, caught my attention. It seemed off. I felt it before I saw it, a subtle weight misaligned, a small vibration when I nudged it. My fingers worked methodically, detaching the base. Beneath it, almost invisible, was a small recording device. Tiny, sophisticated, and utterly wrong in our environment. My pulse jumped. My stomach tightened. I slipped the device into my palm, feeling the cold plastic under my fingers. Hesitation flickered. Should I just ignore it? Could it be a leftover from some lab security experiment? I shook the thought away.
No.
My instinct screamed at me. This was deliberate, intrusive, dangerous. I pressed play on my tablet.
Static.
And then voices, familiar voices. Finn's smooth, confident tone filled the room, and another, softer voice with a foreign lilt, Alara. We'll need the blueprints by next week, Finn said. The package must be intact. No mistakes. You know what's at stake. Alara replied, measured, precise. I've arranged the handoff. Once it's delivered, our contacts will confirm the transfer. Your position as lab director makes it seamless. I froze. Every cell in my body screamed betrayal. My research, the culmination of years of study and delicate experimentation, a highly sensitive bioagent under government protection, was being treated as a commodity. My throat tightened. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I whispered to myself, barely audibly, so it's true. I was never safe, never trusted. The panic that had gripped me immediately after the spill returned in miniature, but beneath it, a spark of determination glowed. If this was the threat I'd been sensing, then I would meet it head-on. I wasn't going to let them compromise my work. Not Finn. Not Alara. Not anyone. I tucked the device into the inner pocket of my lab coat, feeling its weight as both burden and key. The first flicker of control returned. I would not be a pawn in someone else's scheme. I would reclaim my agency, my life, my work. My rebirth wasn't just survival, it was about taking charge, and I intended to do it fully, deliberately, without fear. I didn't sleep that night. The recording device lay on my bedside table, wrapped in a clean cloth like something contaminated. Every time I closed my eyes, Finn's voice replayed in my head, confident, careless, certain I would never hear it. The worst part wasn't the plan itself. It was how calmly he spoke about my work, my life, as if it already belonged to him. At dawn, I sat at the kitchen table and powered the device on again. This time, I listened carefully. I needed to know everything. Each file was time-stamped, organized. Finn had been thorough. That realization cut deeper than anger. He hadn't panicked or acted impulsively. He had planned this for a long time. One recording stood out. His voice was softer there, almost amused. She trusts me completely, he said. She thinks I'm protecting her. Alara replied, trust is a liability. You've neutralized it well. I swallowed hard. Neutralized. As if I were a threat, a variable to be managed. My fingers tightened around the tablet. I didn't cry. I felt hollow, like the fear had burned everything emotional away and left something sharper in its place. I spent the morning cataloging the recordings, making copies, encrypting them under layers only I could undo. I moved carefully, deliberately. This wasn't panic anymore. This was containment. By afternoon, doubt crept in. Maybe I was misreading it. Maybe there was some explanation, some twisted justification Finn would offer if confronted. But every time that thought surfaced, another recording erased it. Discussions about timing, about money, about delivery routes, about how my name, my credibility, would make the transfer unquestionable. At one point, I whispered aloud, "You used me." The words felt foreign but necessary. Naming the betrayal made it real. I thought about confronting him. Imagine the scene, his practiced calm, his reassuring smile. The way he would tell me I was overreacting. That thought alone told me everything I needed to know. Confrontation would only warn him. I needed someone else. Someone who understood security, not excuses. Grant's name surfaced in my mind with unexpected clarity. Grant Voss.
Quiet.
Observant. Protective in a way that never felt possessive. He had questioned Finn's access protocols months ago and had been brushed off. I remembered his voice then, low and firm. Power without oversight always leaks. I hadn't listened closely enough. Now I would. I sent him a single message. "I found something. It's serious. I need help. I trust you." When his reply came minutes later, "I'm on my way," I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not relief.
Safety.
Grant arrived before I could even finish my second cup of coffee. Tall, calm, and moving with that deliberate precision I'd always admired, he carried a laptop bag, though I suspected he had brought more than just tech. The moment I opened the door, he gave me a long, assessing look. "You've found it," he said, his voice low. I nodded, holding up the recorder. Every conversation, every plan. Finn's been selling my research, my work, to a foreign contact. My hands shook slightly, but I clenched them around the device. And he planned to use it like it was nothing. My career, my life, his plaything. Grant didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, taking the recorder from me with careful hands. "Show me." We sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun filtering through blinds. I replayed the recordings while he typed into his laptop, setting up a secure channel to store backups. The more I listened, the more meticulous Finn appeared. Every step of his betrayal was mapped, timed, and calculated. He even discussed contingency plans, just in case someone discovered his actions before the transfer was complete. Grant's jaw tightened with each replayed file. "This isn't just a breach of trust," he muttered. "This is full-scale espionage. The data, your work, your intellectual property, they'd be in foreign hands before anyone knew what hit them." I swallowed, my throat dry. And he thought I'd never notice. That I'd continue trusting him, like I always have. Grant's eyes softened briefly. "You trusted him, because you had to. That doesn't make you naive, it makes you human. Now we fix this. You won't have to face it alone." Hearing him say that, I realized something. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't alone. Not with the betrayal, not with the danger. I felt a surge of determination. We spent the day mapping every audio file, transcribing names, dates, and technical references. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall we would build to stop Finn. And every moment, Grant stayed calm, attentive, protective, not just of the data, but of me. It was subtle, but I noticed, and it sparked something inside me, something long dormant. By evening, we had a secure, encrypted archive ready to send to authorities and regulators, but I hesitated. "We need a plan first," I said. "I won't let Finn slip through cracks because we acted too fast." Grant nodded, his eyes meeting mine with unwavering focus.
"We do this right.
Together. No shortcuts." I realized then that together didn't just mean professionally. It meant trust, accountability, and maybe something more. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, I met Grant at the lab. The air felt tense, humming with both the sterile scent of chemicals and the quiet anticipation of action. I carried the encrypted recorder and our backup drive, the weight of them heavier than any physical load I had ever lifted. "Before we do anything, we need full containment," Grant said, spreading blueprints across the table. "Not just digital. Physical, procedural, everything." I nodded, scanning every diagram, every security checkpoint, mentally calculating the paths Finn could have exploited. "We can't just cut him off digitally," I said. "He's cunning. If there's a physical weakness, he'll find it." Grant's gaze lingered on me for a fraction longer than necessary, and I caught a flicker of reassurance there, as if he silently promised he would protect me through it all. My chest warmed slightly, though I pushed the feeling aside. This was about security, about survival, not feelings. We divided tasks. I would oversee the lab's internal systems, manually checking every access log, every biometric entry, and comparing them with our backups. Grant would coordinate with the security team, tightening access points, installing monitoring protocols, and preparing for immediate intervention if Finn tried to breach containment physically. Hours passed with a quiet intensity. The hum of computers and the click of Grant's keys were almost hypnotic, and I felt a strange comfort in his steady presence. At one point, I glanced up and found him watching me. "You're thorough," he said softly. I smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I have to be. This isn't just my work. It's everything I've built." He nodded. "And now no one can take that from you. Not him, not anyone." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy, but not uncomfortable. I realized that trust, something I had always struggled with, was forming here. Not forced, not expected, but earned through competence, loyalty, and shared purpose. By evening, our lockdown plan was operational. Every digital entry was monitored, every lab access point secured. We even set up a silent alarm system, triggering the authorities and our internal security if Finn attempted any movement toward the lab or the data. Grant handed me a cup of water. "Drink," he said, and our fingers brushed. The contact lingered longer than necessary, and I noticed the warmth of his touch, the reassurance behind it. I met his eyes and caught the unspoken agreement. We were partners in every sense now. Not just in stopping Finn, but in facing the aftermath together. And for the first time in weeks, I felt safe, completely, unconditionally safe. And maybe, just maybe, something more than safety was blooming between us. The lab was eerily quiet that night, the fluorescent lights casting long, sterile shadows across the polished floors. I could feel every pulse of my own heartbeat as I monitored the access logs, my eyes scanning line after line for any sign of anomaly.
Then I saw it.
A door that should have been locked had registered a failed access attempt, 3 in a row. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My mind raced. Finn was testing the system. He hadn't given up. "Grant," I whispered into the headset, my voice tight with urgency. "I see it," he said calmly, though I could sense the tension beneath. "Stay where you are. I'm activating the lockdown overrides. Don't move until I tell you." I obeyed, gripping the recorder tightly. My hands were steady despite the adrenaline, my training kicking in. I had faced dangerous chemicals, near-fatal exposures, but this felt personal, intimate. My life, my research, my trust, they were all under attack. Through the monitors, I watched Grant's silhouette move with precise efficiency. He was a silent guardian, an invisible shield that somehow made me feel safer even as my world threatened to crumble. My chest tightened at the realization. I relied on him, and that reliance didn't frighten me. It grounded me. "Override engaged," he said after a tense few minutes. "He won't get through tonight. I've secured every entry and exit." I exhaled, a long, shaky breath that had been held far too long. "Thank you," I murmured. "You don't need to thank me," he replied softly, and there was a warmth in his voice that I couldn't ignore. My gaze met his through the monitor feed, and for a fleeting moment, the world shrank to just the two of us. I realized then that our partnership wasn't just professional. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding that we had each other's backs no matter what. And maybe there was something more growing here. The night passed with tense vigilance. Finn tested the system a few more times, leaving digital fingerprints that we meticulously traced. Each attempt only strengthened my confidence in our plan and in Grant. He was meticulous, patient, and utterly reliable, a stark contrast to the betrayal I had endured with Finn. By dawn, we had mapped every potential vulnerability, fortified every weak point, and neutralized every avenue of attack. I leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. And when Grant's hand brushed mine as he passed the final secured keycard, I didn't pull away. Something unspoken passed between us, a spark of connection, trust, and perhaps a first flicker of something deeper. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel isolated. I felt protected. And more dangerously, I felt alive. The lab was quiet again, but the tension hadn't left me. Even though Finn's attempts had been thwarted, the lingering fear reminded me of how vulnerable I had been and how much I depended on Grant. He was there, leaning over the console, reviewing the logs with the calm, precise movements I had come to rely on. I felt an odd sense of safety watching him work, a feeling I hadn't realized I craved until now. "Everything checks out," he said, straightening up. His gaze met mine, and for a moment, the sterile, metallic room seemed warmer, softer. I swallowed. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Grant shrugged, but there was a subtle softness in his eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Lila. I just make sure the bad guys don't win." His words were simple, but the weight behind them made my chest tighten. I had been betrayed, used, exposed to danger by someone I trusted completely, and now, in the quiet aftermath, I realized how much I needed someone I could truly trust, not just professionally, but personally. We spent hours going through every potential security vulnerability, side by side. I found myself watching him more than the logs, noticing the way his brows furrowed in concentration, the way he reached for my hand to point out a specific entry. It was almost intimate, these small touches, these shared moments of focus and understanding. At one point, I caught him glancing at me, and our eyes met. He didn't look away immediately. Instead, there was a moment of acknowledgement, something unspoken but heavy with meaning. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel safe without fear. "Grant, thank you," I murmured again, this time with a tremor that betrayed more than gratitude. "You don't need to say it," he replied softly, and for a fleeting moment, the lab walls disappeared, leaving only us. We laughed softly when a minor glitch in the system triggered a harmless alert, breaking the tension. And in that laughter, I realized something important. Trust wasn't just about safety protocols and security measures. It was about allowing someone in, letting them see your vulnerabilities without fear. By the end of the night, we had fortified every digital and physical entry point. But more importantly, I felt something else, an emotional firewall, built not of steel or code, but of trust and mutual respect. And somewhere deep down, I knew that if I was going to rebuild my life, Grant would be by my side, not just as a colleague, but as someone I could rely on in every sense. The lab smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone, but tonight it felt different, less clinical, more alive. I caught myself glancing at Grant more often than necessary, noticing how the dim overhead lights highlighted the angles of his jaw, the focus in his eyes. He was reviewing a security schematic, but I felt an odd flutter in my chest, like my body recognized him as a safe harbor, not just a colleague. "Lila, can you verify these logs?" he asked, gesturing toward the monitor. I walked over, and as I leaned beside him, our arms brushed. I felt the spark immediately, and my cheeks warmed despite the lab's cool air. "You should have marked these discrepancies sooner," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, but my pulse betrayed me. He chuckled softly. "And let you think I made a mistake? Never." The teasing tone made me laugh, a genuine laugh I hadn't felt in weeks. He turned toward me, and for a moment, the professional barrier slipped. I noticed his hand linger near mine on the console, almost instinctively. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to handle all this on your own." I met his gaze, and something in his eyes made it impossible to retreat behind my usual composure. "I know," I admitted, voice low. "But it's hard to trust again after everything." Grant's expression softened. "I get that. But you can trust me. You don't have to justify your caution to me." The sincerity in his voice made my heart skip. I wanted to say more, to tell him how much I already did trust him, how safe he made me feel, but the words felt too intimate, too vulnerable. Instead, I simply nodded. As we reviewed the last batch of recordings together, our shoulders touched again, and this time, I didn't move away. He glanced at me, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. There was a quiet electricity in that look, an unspoken acknowledgement of something deeper. "Lila," he said, leaning slightly closer, "I think we make a pretty good team." I smiled back, heart racing, knowing he meant more than just professional collaboration. "The best," I whispered. For the first time since discovering Finn's betrayal, I allowed myself to hope that trust could grow into something stronger, something intimate. And in that quiet lab, amidst screens and schematics, it felt as though a new protocol was forming, one not of rules and regulations, but of mutual care, unspoken feelings, and the tentative beginnings of love. The lab was quiet now, the chaos of the Finn investigation finally winding down. I sat at my workstation, reviewing the final reports that Grant and I had prepared for the authorities. Everything was documented, every recording timestamped, every threat neutralized. And yet, despite the sense of professional closure, my heart felt restless. Grant appeared beside me, leaning casually against the edge of my desk. His presence was grounding, familiar, yet somehow electrifying. He held 2 steaming mugs of coffee and, without waiting for an invitation, placed one in front of me. "You earned this," he said softly. I looked up at him, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Thanks," I murmured. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside the lab ceased to exist. The tension, the fear, the betrayal, it all seemed to fade. Only he remained, a steady anchor after weeks of turmoil. "I was thinking," he began, his voice low, "we've been through a lot together. And I know trust isn't easy for you anymore." He took a step closer, his hand brushing mine as he set the second mug down. "But I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "Grant, words failed me, but my gaze said what my lips couldn't yet form. I wanted him, wanted this trust, this safety, this closeness." He leaned forward slowly, giving me the space to pull away if I wished, but I didn't. Our foreheads touched first, a gentle press, a silent confirmation. And then, with careful, deliberate motion, his lips found mine. The kiss was soft at first, a question asked in the quiet of the lab. I responded instinctively, letting the weight of all my fear, relief, and newfound trust melt into that single moment. When we finally pulled back, our breaths mingled, hearts racing in unison. He smiled, just slightly, but it carried an entire conversation, reassurance, hope, and the promise of something real. "I've wanted this for a long time," he admitted, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Me too," I whispered, feeling a thrill I hadn't felt in months, or maybe years. The lab around us felt safe, familiar, but it also felt like the beginning of something entirely new. Our partnership, once professional, forged in crisis, had evolved. And now, it was personal, intimate, grounded in mutual respect, trust, and the sparks of love. As we stood there, holding each other, I knew this was only the beginning. Together, Grant and I would face any threat, any danger. But for the first time, I also knew we could face life together, safe, secure, and finally, truly happy.